Welcome to episode 2 of my Overwatch Champions Series Stage 1 Group Stage Guide and Preview. In the last one, we covered EMEA and that region as a whole. If you missed it, be sure to check out a link which I will provide in the description. For today's video though, we're going to hone our sights in on North America. We're going to evaluate all these teams, do a small power ranking, and I'll give you my predictions on who I think is going to advance through the group stage to give you an idea of where I currently sit with this talent pool. But before then, we're just going to get some basic information out of the way in case you missed out on the EMEA video which I made yesterday. As a quick refresher, the format is literally identical to what's going on in EMEA, where things are going to start off on March 8th and it'll end on March 17th, with the 8 best teams competing in those groups moving on to the double elimination finals bracket, where they'll have an opportunity to compete for more and more circuit points, and said circuit points will eventually decide who goes on to compete in Dallas at the midway point, as well as for the first ever Overwatch Champions Series Championship matchup held at DreamHack Sweden later this year. Said main event will be held the week after this one, so stay tuned. I'll be making a preview video for that as well as EMEA when the time comes. If you want to know where you can watch all this stuff, again, it's going to be held on the Overwatch Esports YouTube and Twitch channels depending on your preference. And we're going to have a live broadcast, just as we will for EMEA, with Zoe, Jake, Reinforced, Jaws, Mr. X, Necra, Uber, and maybe some other guests. There's also going to be plenty of co-streams, including people on Twitch, I'd like to imagine. I myself am in all likelihood going to co-stream a lot of these matches, so definitely check out my YouTube channel when these games go live, as I'll probably be covering them. If you want to know more about the tournament format, as well as scheduling and broadcast information, check out the Wikipedia link, which I will leave a link to in the description. And of course, I highly encourage you to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all of the most recent OWCS news, events, and other content that I make on this channel. Your support would mean a lot to me. Anyway, let's dive straight into the meat and potatoes of this video. Let's talk about this group, the top 16 teams from the Swiss stage in NA. It's locked in, we're ready to go, and this is what my consensus is for the power rankings. Like with EMEA, take it very lightly, as a bunch of this could change super duper quick. I don't know that much about some of these teams in particular, especially towards the bottom, but this is generally how I feel knowing what I do. NA in particular has some very clear favorites that are just way ahead of most, if not all of the competition, and it's all going to start with the number 1 seed, the only team to go undefeated in the Swiss stage, the Toronto Defiant. The lone surviving franchise of the destruction of Overwatch League is back to finally try and claim glory after years of mediocrity, and this just might be their best opportunity yet, as clearly, with the type of team they've built, there should be no reason they are not at the top of North America and eventually competing in the international tournaments. A team of someone, RuPaul, Merit, Vega, and Sugar Free is pretty nasty in general, but it gets even scarier just knowing how scarce some of the talent is out in North America. I mean, they've picked up so many elite players to try and guide them to victory, including 3 Overwatch League champions, 3 defending champs from the Florida Mayhem leading the way. And just knowing they're all playing at the same facility together, they have that camaraderie, and the coaching as well, makes you feel like they have a pretty big leg up over basically every other team out there in North America right now. They have all the resources and the talent needed in the world to go far. Some people might look at the meta and have some questions, just knowing that RuPaul isn't completely proven on like a Kiriko, let's say, and we also have to remember that Merit maybe has some things to prove on Tracer, but knowing the pedigree of these players and knowing their flexibility from their Florida days, I don't see any reason to be truly concerned about them, especially this early on. If they don't absolutely breeze through the group stage and even beyond, that'd be a shocker. The question is, can anybody even begin to stand up to them? Well, in my opinion, one team that definitely has an opportunity is the newly formed M80. They only got 6th in the Swiss stage, but when you look at their roster compared to the others, it feels like on paper they are probably number 2. And honestly, they may even be a rival for Toronto at one point or another. Maybe not this early on, just because this roster still is fairly new. I mean, literally like the day of the Swiss stage, essentially, they formed. Like, it's a combination of two different teams because of some drama that went on online involving the likes of Sam and OG. I'm not going to cover that in this video. You can check it out on Twitter for yourself if you're curious. But just know, because of that destruction that went on, this team is now a thing, and they are boasting some pretty good talent. Somebody like Hydron, Hawk, Ultraviolet, I mean, absolute staples of the scene. Renko and Lep are both decent as well, but the big part of this team comes in through their Korean imports. Spectra, and then Pelican. That's the big name that stands out. Pelican, one of the best players ever, basically, is now joining OWCS NA, when for a while it seemed like he had no interest whatsoever in competing in OWCS, at least in Stage 1. That's what he said on Discord a while back, but here he is now, out of the blue, filling in for this team to make for what looks like a pretty ridiculous DPS line on paper. Peli and Spectra in an Echo Tracer meta alongside Hydron? I mean, bro, that is bonkers. And I believe Pelican is only just getting into NA soon, like I believe sometime this week, as he was dealing with visa issues, according to Hydron on Scrim. So they're not even at full power yet, and they still did this well, even after just barely forming like the other day. This team means business if they can actually get it together, and I know they will. They just need more time to gel and to figure things out with this type of talent lineup. That said, even though this lineup is hype on paper, don't be too surprised if there are some miscues, as again, it is still really early on in the process for these guys. They may even get eliminated after the group stage a bit earlier than you'd anticipate, but we know how dangerous this team can be though, that's the point. They are pretty well balanced. They have a ridiculous DPS line. Hawk is a solid tank player, one of the best NA has to offer, in a Doom and Diva setup. I mean, that is absolutely perfect for him. And even though I don't have the most confidence in somebody like Lep or Renko, at least they still have Ultraviolet leading the way to give at least some stability on that backline. There's a lot of good players on this team. I have questions about these guys for sure, but in the end, even with some of the doubts in mind, I could still very easily see them being the number 2 team in NA and making it to that finals later this month. We'll have to see though. Regardless, should be a pretty interesting team to watch and somebody who can make a lot of noise in this tournament. Another team I'm pretty excited about heading into this tournament is definitely Timeless. I think they could be the dark horse to be the actual number 2 team in this thing. They don't have all of the recognizable OWL names that Toronto or M80 do, but they have a lot of what I like and what I consider to be some of those up-and-comers who have more of an opportunity to prove themselves now that this region isn't as locked in as it once was. Anyone who's been following me for a while knows that I'm a big fan of these Wisp players. They've all come on to Timeless. They've left that organization. They've been good for a while. They looked great in the Flash Ops tournament back during the winter, nearly getting to the finals against the team that literally won it all. I mean, this team has so much talent that's ready to go out there and shine on the bright stage. I'm a big fan of the Rocket and Chopper DPS line. They've got the Sunjun import as well. They've got an opener import for their backline alongside CJ. The tanks I'm also a pretty decent fan of as well. This Timeless team, I think, could be a pretty interesting underdog to watch. I'm not saying they're going to win the entire thing or anything, but I'd expect them to be pretty dominant in the group stage early on, knowing the talent they have, as well as a lot of the good synergy that many of these players already possess together. I mean, CJ was also on that Wisp team back during that Flash Ops tourney. They've got everything that you want. This is an exciting young team on the rise. Another team that could be in that top 2, top 3 conversation that was also affected by the roster destruction, much like M80, is WD-40. They were able to pick up Seeker as a potential superstar DPS, but then they're also pairing him up with Top Dragon as well. We've got Mirror making a return. They've got a Liar MCD backline as well. For this standard, for NA standards, especially in the group stage portion, this isn't bad at all. Despite randomly coming together at the last moment, they still went 8-1 during the Swiss stage, and they looked damn good against everybody not named Toronto. I mean, we know what Seeker wants to do out there. I have questions about him potentially if he's rocking a Tracer, let's say, or an Echo, But after the stuff that happened on the Valiant, you already know this dude is locked in and is ready to move on from that and play for a better team and find more success in his career. This is such a big opportunity, and it's hard to see him wasting it. And generally, I mean, there's a lot of other likable parts of the team as well. Top Dragon certainly has something to prove at the highest level still, but he's been sticking around for quite a bit, trying to prove himself and level up. He's a good flex DPS prospect. We know that Mir's been working on his tank game for a while, and Doomfist happens to be one of his specialties, which lines up great. Liar's a solid Lucio player. I'm sure he's excited about playing on a different team as well. I don't know how MCD's gonna line up in this situation. Kind of a strange fit like with Top Dragon. But generally, I mean, compared to a lot of the other talent pool out there, this team ain't bad at all. I think that they're a bit more questionable, and they have a lot more to prove than a team like M80, let's say. But if they can reach their potential, they can definitely fight with the big dogs. Speaking of potential big dogs, how about the return of the Maryville Saints? They're back at it yet again, and this might be the most excited I've ever been to watch them, as we finally get to see the return of the king himself, Dante. After retiring from Overwatch League, he's finally back competing in a big competition like this, and now is the perfect time to see him make a comeback, as it is Doom time. We could see Maryville rock a lot of Doomfist in this upcoming group stage, and we know the damage this guy can cause on that hero at the highest level possible. He could very easily be one of the best tanks if he's able to play that meta consistently. But that's not even where the excitement ends. It goes beyond Dante. There's a lot of other interesting players that could do some great things in a tournament like this. I, for one, am pretty hyped to watch the return of King. This guy has been good for quite a long time now. A lot of people thought he was underappreciated during his Vancouver Titans days, and that he should have been in the league last year. Just a great flex DPS, and I'm excited to watch him play when the lights are bright again, as he's usually pretty clutch in these situations. Not to mention that you have Vision, who's had potential for a long time now, who showed some of that off during the Pro-Am back in the day. Juby, back making his return, in a Lucio meta in fact, the one situation where you definitely have a lot of trust in him. Maryville's got a squad here. And again, just knowing the meta and the comfort compared to some of these other newly formed teams, it makes me think that Maryville could have a very competitive outing, both in the group stage and beyond, as one of the better teams in Stage 1. That's kind of who I see as like the top 5, my favorites to make it through the groups without much of a problem, and to do well beyond that in the main event. But there's some other teams I'd definitely be on the lookout for as well that could make some serious noise. One of which is Students of the Game, a team that originally I wasn't paying that much attention to, but then I watched them do a couple of scrims on Reinforce's stream against some actual competition, and I was blown away. They've got some recognizable faces here, one of which is definitely Rack Attack. It's cool to see him on a better team that's actually winning games now. That's some progress compared to the Vegas days for sure. And then Infected, he's always had a lot of potential as a tank player, probably one of the better prospects in NA these days. Someone we've been looking forward to watching on the big stage for sure. Cal was in OWL last year. They've got another chance to show themselves off. But most importantly, and the thing that I'm the most excited to watch about this team, comes through their DPS player, PGE. Admittedly, I had no idea who they were before watching Reinforce's stream, but boy am I glad I found out about them, because oh my god, this dude has some insane talent when it comes to his mechanics. I only got to see some snippets, but feels like an insta spark plug when I watch him play. Just hitting shot after shot on Widow, so many headshots. This is a person who could take over a game at any given moment, and is probably one of the prospects I'll be on the biggest lookout for in OWCS. One of the potential rising stars right here. Definitely watch this team with close eyes. There's a couple of awesome players that I could foresee having big time coming out matches that get people excited about them, and you have the Rack Attack storyline on top of it. What more could you possibly ask for? This team could very easily get through their groups and potentially even make a run at like top 4 or top 6 or something like that in the Stage 1 main event later on. Something else I'd like to do a bit of a shout out for is the fact that a couple of teams that have some large representation in calling all heroes are making an appearance and were able to do well enough to make it through the Swiss stage, one of which is the 4th place finisher, Beluga's Platoon. You'll probably recognize Halo, who was a main support player on on the NYXL last year and has been a part of the Overwatch professional scene for quite some time. But then there's also their DPS player, Bun. Bun, from what I can tell, the last handful of months has generated some serious hype from within the CAH scene. One of the biggest heroes, consistently putting on some dominant flex DPS performances and helping Timeless win the Calling All Heroes Championship game back at the beginning of February. And also a part of the J3 Community Clash first place team, so there's that for you as well. Beluga's platoon has a great chance to give CAH a lot more representation. I mean, they've done well for themselves so far, getting 4th place in the Swiss. And this is a great chance to show even more progression, and I'm excited to see just how far they can go. But they're not the only ones joining the fray, as Dreamland also has some of that representation going on, with the likes of Annie Yoon, who gets to escape NYXL and actually play some games, as well as Sten, or X10, sorry if I mispronounced that, another Calling All Heroes legend, and somebody who's been putting up some unbelievable performances on Hitscan recently. From some of the gameplay I've seen on the Sojourn, just an absolute masterpiece, and I'm excited to see how the skill translates at the highest level possible. Not to mention, they have some other players that definitely stand out, such as Grapes, a longtime player in NA Contenders. Cowman's making a return. You've got Astro, the Canadian tank player who was in the World Cup recently. Dreamland might be kinda underrated, not gonna lie. For a couple of other noteworthy teams, one is definitely Pirates in Pajamas, an org that usually does pretty consistent when it comes to these tournaments, never a top finisher, but usually fairly relevant, and I think despite finishing in 13th during the Swiss, I could actually see them moving on from their groups. They have the potential to do so, especially when they have the GOAT, Magic Mateball, at main support. This man once again has a chance to build upon his legend, and I can't wait to watch it unfold. I'd say Obsidian and Pound Town, great name by the way, are also teams you should be looking out for. Obsidian's got a Dove Dynasty DPS line, and with Pound Town, they've got some of the former 2023 Valiant boys, like Paintbrush, Nas, and Crowie as well. Beyond that, there's quite a few teams that finished low and even high that I don't even know that much about. I don't know a bunch of these players, and they just might end up becoming fan favorites if they go out there and perform well enough, and just knowing the general balancing of the group, there's a chance that some of them might even escape into the next round. Speaking of the groups, here's all 4 of them and who I think is going to advance from each one. In Group A, obviously Toronto Defiance going to make it out no problem. I mean, this group is just incredibly one-sided. I don't know why it's like this, but you have 3 teams with a lot of no-names plus Toronto. It's going to be a bloodbath to see who gets out alongside them, but I decided to pick Artemis as when I looked at their history and how they did in the Swiss stage, it felt like they played some more relevant opponents while holding their own, so I like them personally. In Group B, things could be a little more interesting, but generally you'd have to favor Maryville and WD-40, as they have really good players, and the specific meta we're in right now just fits their rosters well, I feel. It's no offense to Shikigami and Timeless Obsidian, who I both think are underrated. This just so happens to be an unfortunate grouping for them. In Group C, it's pretty straightforward. It's M80 and Timeless for sure for me. I mean, these are arguably 2 of like the top 5 teams in the entire stage, let alone the group. It's kind of ridiculous they both got put in the same group because of how the Swiss stage rankings worked, but oh well, what can you do? These 2 should fly through with relative ease. And then there's Group D, which seems like it could have the widest possible range of results. Outside of Paragon Onyx, I feel that any combination of the other 3 teams could make it through into the next round. For me, I'm going with Pirates in Pajamas and the Students of the Game. I mentioned Students before. I think that I'm pretty high on them overall. I think they're going to be better than their roster would suggest. They have a lot of talent there. And then I'm going with Pirates over Beluga's platoon, because I feel like Pirates just never got many chances to prove themselves. And whenever they did in the Swiss, they usually did pretty well for themselves. This is a trustworthy org that usually does well in these scenarios. So I'm going to ride it out with the GOAT Magic Mateball and say they get through. Those are the 8 teams that I predict will move on to the Stage 1 main event being held later this March. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Who do you think's going to win? Who do you think's underrated? Who are you looking forward to watch? And any other questions you might have. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more Overwatch Champions Series content every single week. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.